There's a very fun thing also that I found recently, which is I saw that someone had taken the opening cutscene where it's Bale and Arnor fighting, and they had perfectly set it to, oh god, Duel of Fates. And I don't know if it's deliberate, but so many moments just line up brilliantly, and I just can't help but feel like it was completely deliberate.
He's not dead, but the spirit of John Williams was with us. Yeah.
Absolutely. Allison, so good to have you back again for another interview. Hope you're doing well.
Friend, it is always wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much for having us.
Okay, so I got a bunch of questions with regards to the shape of Renegades, but also with regards to the shape of Destiny's narrative. We're reaching this, I think, very interesting point where obviously we know that Shattered Cycle and The Alchemist are on the way. We haven't had any reveals for things yet. And we're at this kind of end of the year reflection point, given that this is very close to sort of New Year's, Christmas, that kind of time period. So a lot of this is less looking forward and more sort of introspection with regards to the past. But I wanted to start with some questions which, they're a lot more about just kind of the state of the game as opposed to the state of Renegades in particular. Although we will discuss a fair share of Renegades mysteries. For people in the comments section, yeah, I took a look around and I definitely pulled some of the more fascinating questions that a bunch of you guys had. So yeah.
Excited to tackle them. Let's do it.
Okay, so with that in mind, I wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about how the metaphorical sausage is made in this first question, which is just...
It's the best kind of sausage.
Yeah, absolutely. How does the team now prioritize what stories get told? Like, what's the triage process looking like nowadays? How are things managed? Because obviously, we'd all love to go ahead and do like 10 billion lore books and 10,000 lines of awesome dialogue that appear in game. Everything being a cutscene would be fantastic. But how does all of this basically just get sort of panned out and chosen? And with the way that, you know, the game is working now, with it being a double release cycle every year for big expansions, I imagine that's changed a whole lot. What does that look like in this particular day and age of Destiny?
Yeah, so I think let's zoom out and kind of think about like how do we tell stories? If we told 20 million lore books, we'd be making a book, and if we showed 20 minutes of cutscenes, now we're a TV show. We are a video game, and we're a gun game. We are a game where the action is the thing that tells the story, and it is punctuated by the cinematics. How we divide up the story inside of that, kind of depends on how we approach best practices for storytelling, right? What are the goals? What are the things that matter to the player? Universally, when we try and tell stories, we prioritize first, does it make sense? Is it baffling? Or are we making sure that this is grokkable to the average player who's playing it? Does it make sense is always the first question. Is it boring is always the second question. Are we engaged throughout? Is there momentum? Are there character arcs that are interesting? Is the plot moving the world forward in an exciting way? And then on top of both of those two like foundations that we're building on are the goals of the release. For Renegades, in particular, our goals were complicated because we had to do two things at the same time. We had to make sure this absolutely felt like a Star Wars experience and that it absolutely felt like a Destiny experience at the same time. And so that helped us choose what do we prioritize when we're putting most of our resources towards something expensive and complicated like a cinematic, for example, versus something that is easier for us on the narrative team to kind of make on our own with the help of our friends on editorial and localization, like a lore book. And so determining what goes where depends on how it achieves all of those goals that I just listed out. That meant for most of our cinematics, we prioritized the things that cinematics are good at, big flashy visuals that felt like we could communicate using visual storytelling the way that Star Wars does. For some of the more complicated ideas that we had that we knew would be difficult to express in a cinematic with the resources that we had, that would be more at home in a lore book, for example. So the process of deciding what goes where is really a very complicated game of resource management. We spend a lot of time figuring out where our resources are best placed to get the most bang for our literal buck sometimes.
And of course, it's a lot trickier to figure out changes according to what kind of cutscene it is and what element needs to change. So, I imagine when it comes to the cutscenes like the one with Lodi and Aeris, where it's not animated, but very clearly there's a lot of artistry that's gone into it. Changing the audio on something like that might not be too tricky. Changing the actual visuals, however, a lot trickier, a lot tougher.
Very much so. And those visuals and cinematics, the scripts for those are one of the first things that are locked. We lock those really early in the process because it takes so long to create one of those animated sequences. And you're right, once we get those visuals in place, it's really hard to change them. Changing the audio is surprisingly complicated. We have to match the VO for time, sometimes matching for lip flap, like how the lips and the mouth is moving. But one of the challenges of creating a story for games is that we don't create a story in order. We don't write it from beginning to end. We have to come up with the outline and then break that outline down by, okay, which parts of a story do we finish first, like the cinematics, and which ones come last, like the lore books. So if there is like a shift or a change halfway through that process, it becomes a really interesting challenge trying to get the stuff that we locked early in order to match, and being able to pivot the later stuff is a little bit easier. Yeah, it's a really complicated game of Catan, of figuring out, okay, I need some more sheep, and I know you've got ore. What are we willing to trade in order to make that happen?
How can I build the road from objective to objective and actually get this finished?
Exactly.
So, Edge of Fate was a really complex and nuanced story that I really, really enjoyed. I thought it was an amazing start to the Fate saga. Renegades, on the other hand, I don't think is a bad story, but I would definitely define it as a lot more approachable of a narrative with much clearer characters and motivations. Especially considering that at its core, we're not necessarily having to explain fourth dimensional beings the whole time or talking about, individuals that can manipulate time. If there is a sliding scale of complex to approachable, where is the narrative team aiming for future expansions to land on the scale? Is it even possible to entirely keep things simple when you have topics as dense as the 9 involved? Is this one of those things where it's always going to be a bit of a moving bullseye according to what the reactions of the community are compared to the story you guys are trying to tell? Where are we kind of trying to land these things nowadays? If we're looking at something that is very easily digestible, like Renegades, where, you have very clear character archetypes, versus Edge of Fate, which is all down into the nitty-gritty nuance.
Yeah, I reject the scale of complex to approachable and instead submit genres. The Edge of Fate was a mystery. We knew that we wanted to make something that felt really Star Wars, so we made a roller coaster. Renegades is a straightforward action adventure. And when we think about story, we think about genre not just in terms of like, what kind of very specific sci-fi is this, but also like story-wise, what's the genre that we're telling? Is it a farce? Is it a tragedy? Like, is this a like Russian Chekhov living room mystery? Like, yes, maybe. But all of those things, I think that you still have to create for multiple audiences at the same time. So with the mystery of the Edge of Fate, we wanted to make sure that average person still knew what was going on and could follow along, even if it had lots of layers and depth and pieces underneath the surface. With Renegades, similarly, we knew that we wanted it to feel like a Star Wars movie, we wanted it to be a roller coaster. We need to make sure that you felt strapped in, totally taken care of, you're going for a ride. And if you want to lean over the side and look at all the things deep under the roller coaster, you're going to find a lot of really, really cool stuff down there. We think of it in two parts. Like there's the genre part of what kind of genre of storytelling are we doing? And there's remembering that we're creating this for both average player who may not be listening all the time, as well as the super deep lore fan. So you gotta hit both. But yeah, I love roller coasters and I love really sad, complicated mysteries. We contain multitudes.
I really love I love the rejection of the scale entirely there as well, because that's also a much better way of defining some of these expansions. Not sitting there and saying I know anything with regards to Shattered Cycle, but if all the hints towards old Chicago and potentially Lodi seeing through the eyes of something down there, we may have a very interesting story, maybe a Frankenstein or a Dracula or something. I don't know. It's a very exciting way of looking at that. Okay.
I agree. We'll get to Chicago later. I'm put a little pin in that.
Oh, Oh, yes, indeed. I have it on the list of questions, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, so it is a personal take, but I always feel like narratives in Destiny are a lot more impactful when people feel like they're attached to characters and that to an extent they themselves belong within the universe. As a general point, I think that, belonging within any live service, MMO, long-term investment game is a really important concept to grapple to immediately at the core of everything, whether that's narrative or the design of gameplay activities or anything, basically. Something that lets you invest into the world is a part of that. No individual, narrative team member, or community member owns any individual characters on the narrative side, of course. However, how much is the Fate Saga being shaped by the positive early reactions to characters like Lodi, Blue, and Dredge and Bale?
Yeah, so one of the features of being a pro is being able to call your shots. I would say that the Fate Saga is not necessarily being shaped by community reaction to these characters. Rather, we created these characters to be fascinating. Like, we wanted to make sure that our players would be fascinated by them, and we called the shot that, like, yeah, we think these characters are going to be pretty fun. Like, we think we're going to want to keep them around for a while. And so as we were building out the Fate Saga, we were building in these new characters like Bale and like Lodi and like Blue, knowing like, yeah, we want to play with these for a few years. So rather than like wait and confirm like, gosh, I hope our players like these, from the beginning, we should try to make characters that are likable and characters that are fascinating, characters that you want to spend time with. I think that making a bold choice and trusting that you'll get the reaction that you're hoping for is a sign of making a quality character from the start.
So if you don't mind me expanding on that, then are there any
Sure.
moments where you haven't necessarily called the shot, but where people have been like, oh my gosh, I love this particular facet of the game, I love this character, I feel like this is something that makes me feel like I belong in this and want to belong with this? Are there any shots where you've made it, but you've not necessarily called it? And I guess same question, has that really sort of pushed you to sort of shape the Fate Saga a little bit in a different direction than you initially suspected?
That's a good question. It wasn't Fate Saga, but the first character that comes to mind is Failsafe. When we were giving her a little bit of a makeover and bringing her back for Echoes, I remember we were like pretty sure like, yeah, this is a funny character. I want to spend time with her, and there was a little bit of worry of like, well, we're bringing her up to speed. We hope people like where she's going to go. There was a little bit of hope that like, I hope this lands, and once it did land, like, yeah, okay, we knew what we were doing. We've got this okay. I think the experience of like doing this for a while means being able to trust when you know that something is going to land, and being able to catch early if something isn't and get in there and fix it. That's one of the things that we've had to do a couple of times. Like if there's a character where we see where they're going and can tell like, I think we can make this punch a little bit more. It gives us an opportunity to get in there before it's too late and find a way to get them where we need them to go and then send them out into the world. No process is perfect, but one of the fun parts about developing characters is getting to know them and then figuring out, okay, how can I dial this up even more so that someone outside this building is going to love them too?
Big overarching Destiny questions kind of put to the side for a moment. Let's talk about Renegades and all of the interesting beats that have sort of arisen from there. And I want to start with a big one. Basically, Nightfall Station. Wow, what a cutscene. Terrifying.
Damn, right?
Result of everything. My question is, how does the Nightfall Station and Eclipse energy generally work? How does it function? We know that the Outer Orbits gifted Bale with the station core, and according to Lodi, it was like someone pulled the plug from the fourth dimension. We have no clue what Eclipse energy is, let alone how it works. We have vague ideas of like, the light is attached to the paracausal elements of the physical universe, whereas the darkness is attached to paracausal elements within the sort of psychic realms. What can you tell us, if anything, about Eclipse energy? I know this is a really hot topic in the lore community right now.
I know. It's exciting to watch from our angle. Let's set aside Nightfall Station for right now because that's kind of like the car or the vehicle, right? Like it's the machine, but the actual interesting thing is eclipse energy, the thing that makes it go. The metaphor that we've been using on the team is that we can think of eclipse energy and what the Nine are able to do in this case as taking the gas knob and turning it off. One of the big questions that we had when we knew in Edge of Fate and when we were creating the Fate Saga that we wanted to address with the Nine is what do they do? Like, what are they for? Like, what's the function of the Nine? And one of the early ideas that we had and things that made sense was the Nine are laws. They are the rules. We say that pretty explicitly a couple times. And those rules extend out to all of the physical forces in our galaxy, including the forces that enable the effect of paracausality, right? The Nine cannot use paracausality themselves. They are not paracausal. That's not their deal. That will always be true. But what they are is they enable the conditions that paracausality can thrive. And those conditions can be turned all the way up and they can be turned all the way down. And what Eclipse is it is a negation of the conditions that enable paracausality. Which is fatal when aimed at a paracausal being like a guardian or like a ghost. If we were to aim that at average person on the street who's using darkness, for example, they'd probably be fine, but they also probably wouldn't feel great. But they wouldn't die because they aren't inherently paracausal the same way that a guardian is. So again, we can kind of think of it like the Nine are the hand on the knob of the gas stove that are able to turn it up and down, but they can't make the flame that ignites the stovetop.
This kind of also gets into another question that I wanted to ask as well. It's not on the list in front of us today, but it's very much that case of Bale states that, you know, Zavala would not necessarily be killed outright if Nightfall Station attacked the last city, that he would survive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when Blue was making her analysis of it in the aftermath of the Tharsis massacre, it was a very clear thing of it will affect the light and the dark. So I guess that's the nuance of it. And yes. It comes down to that point of, I suppose, someone using darkness doesn't necessarily have a pure, quote-unquote, I guess the phrase being used on one of the, like, bodies found in Tharsis was a paracausal soul. Is that the right way to look at it?
We can take that in the broad sense of soul. I don't think we want to get into like the metaphysics of does a soul exist in Destiny. Instead, this is kind of a shorthand way of saying like the juice has been squeezed. there's nothing here left because it was affected by this.
Okay, gotcha. So we also saw a moment in the campaign for Renegades where Lodi told us how to say goodbye in Welsh. We know that he has a lot of past experience as a linguist, and he picked up a ton of different languages from various points in his life. Why Welsh in this instance?
We had such a debate on the narrative team about which language we should try to teach the Guardian. And there was a lot of debate of like, well, he spoke Spanish and German at home, so maybe it should be one of those. And then we thought, well, maybe it should be Mandarin or Cantonese or something else. And eventually, in Edge of Fate, we threw out Welsh as like just kind of a throwaway because it seemed fun, and we knew that it was one of the languages that he would have learned during his service in years prior. But for teaching the Guardian a language, for me, what was important is saying something about Lodi as a character with what that language was. And I love that this would be a man who would choose to teach something that would probably be vulnerable after the apocalypse. Plenty of people speak Welsh these days, and shout out to the Welsh community who've given their love to the game so far. But after the apocalypse, I imagine that this linguist would look at the world and go, what would be most valuable for me to give? What's most in danger? And he chose one of the little guys to teach the Guardian. And I really want to give a special thank you to Maria Bartoldi, a friend of mine from my Magic the Gathering days, who double-checked our Welsh and also provided a recording of the correct pronunciation so we could help poor Brian say Welsh for the first time, as well as all of our localization actors were able to do that. And special thanks to my grandmother, Jillian Stone, for helping with some early Welsh stuff as well. She was one of the kids who ended up in Wales during the early days of World War II to keep her safe. So, yeah.
As someone
Thanks, Wales.
As someone who's had to say the fair share of Destiny names in Welsh, such as Dinas Emrys, I absolutely appreciate that having a pronunciation guide is important.
It really is.
Yeah, my buddy Stuart is always the one where I go to him if ever he is in that particular instance. Shout out to you, Receptor. Moving on to a slightly different side of things.
Yeah.
We've seen Dredgen Bale, Dredgen Seer, Dredgen Harrow, our self-proclaimed Dredgen just hiding out in the cantina, like right next to Arnor, and a bunch of nameless apprentices on the Malphus Contemptus and on the ground on Venus. As someone who absolutely loves the concept of the Dredgens, I've got to ask, are we going to see more of them into the future, and how much of a role are they going to play? Obviously, Dredgen Bale is still alive, and he is definitely going to have stories being told about him for some time. I know you guys have...
Oh, he's a busy boy, yeah.
Yeah, you've confirmed some of that, and he is definitely still relevant to the Fate Saga, but Dredgens are out there, like, even before all of this stuff that happened, and they've become a lot more prominent under the Barrent Imperium, under the tutelage of Bale. How prominent is this going to get? How many more Dredgens are we going to see?
Can I just say up front, I love the guts on that one Dredgen guy for hanging out like immediately below Anor Mahal. Like that takes guts to do that. I love that guy. Just what moxie. I think the easy answer here is yes, we will. And I probably can't get any deeper than that. But yeah, I'm smiling from ear to ear because I love the Dredgens too. I love that they have given us a chance to really dig into, like, I don't know, a kind of antagonist that we don't get to experience very often in Destiny. So it feels really fun to bring them back. There's so much potential.
And I think it's also really exciting for people, not just because of the fact that they're human antagonists in some cases, or most of the time. Obviously, now you can have Barrent Dredgens, but it's also one of these moments where Dredgens themselves have a sliding scale of kind of villainy, if that makes sense, from the one extreme of Dredgen Hope, where not really a villain at all, just a bit of a, occasional criminal when a little bit of fun occasionally rears its head.
Yeah, he's a scamp. Yeah.
Yeah, he's someone you'd find that you'd be happy to see in Mos Eisley, whereas... you have people on the flip side of things like Bale, who you very much would not be happy to see in Mos Eisley at all, under any circumstances, never ever.
They're fun because they're people. They're fun because they're human, with an asterisk. What makes them great is that each individual wants something very different and goes about it in very different ways. Being able to contrast the experience of Harrow with Bale is really fun. I see so much potential in them, and it's been a joy to bring them back.
This is also a bit of a cheeky question, because again, it's not on our list, but do you mind if I ask, was Seer human, awoken, or exo? Or I suppose it maybe doesn't matter as much anymore, considering the fact that, the lore describes them as sort of like a cord of rope starting to unravel a little bit by the end. But yeah, it's something that I've been wondering ever since I fought the thing on contest for as long as I did, and realized, yeah, those are 4 fingers and a thumb. That's one of our human analogs, be it awoken, exo, or human.
Yes. I don't know off the top of my head. You would have to ask the incredible writer who was in charge of the dungeon. I will say that they're human shaped for sure. And that was an exciting thing for us, not just narratively, but also on the combat side, like figuring out how we could get that into the game.
Yes, it's the first time we've ever actually fought a proper human enemy, and it's really exciting.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. It's such exciting ground to break for Destiny, because now you can actually tell stories with human enemies at the forefront of it. And granted, not everyone is going to be quite as villainous as Seer was, but man, it's a very exciting precedent, because again, if we've learned one thing from Destiny's lore about the Warlords, it's that human beings can very much be evil too, and evil doesn't necessarily have a shape like an alien. It's very important. Okay, speaking of Dredgens though, Bale is searching for an absolute ton of things around the system, and apparently has seen a vision of our tomb. This is definitely going to be a reach, and I don't know how much can even be said about this. Is there anything you can tell us about that, or about the other various things that Bale and his acolytes are chasing? believe there's a lore tab where Seer talks about the Acolytes digging for something on Mars. Obviously, there's the bit about them searching for the tomb. Whoever is at the center of Shadow and Order when it comes to the Dredgen story, which I presume is Bale again. There may be something they're searching for there. But yeah, Bale is busy. Is there anything you can tell us about the things that he's looking for?
Nothing else other than he's busy. We're going to be exploring the answer to some of these questions in the next couple of months, actually. The Dredgens are searching for sources of power. And there's not much I can say beyond that.
Okay, all right.
I have to play coy with this one, yeah.
Fine. Keep your secrets. It's fine. Okay, right. So, moving to a slightly different tack of things entirely. Earth is being physically changed by what we are now able to call the transmutations, thanks to the death of 3. It's made for some of the more dread-inducing lore for me to read in the expansion personally. I always love it when it talks about things that genuinely are kind of apocalyptic in terms of their writing for the sake of just, hey, this mundane thing like the weather is now terrifying. You know, that's phenomenal.
Oh, it's
stuff.
super fun to write too. Yeah, no, we love messing with you. It's fun.
Oh, great. Excellent. So the stuff we've been reading in the terms of the narrative is after just like 2 months worth of change, and after 2 months after 3 is dead, if I'm not mistaken. If we're already seeing shards of iron raining from the sky and whole mountain ranges being turned to copper, how wild can we expect this to get? I know that in one of our previous interviews, when you said that there would be changes on Earth as a result of 3's death, you described how there wouldn't be, you know, volcanoes erupting from the surface of the Earth and everything going to pot within a day. How bad are things? How wild can we expect this to get, though?
Yeah, I think that answer from before still applies here. The needle that we're trying to thread is that, again, we're making Destiny really fast these days. And that means we have to be very careful about where we put our resources and where we put our time. One of our goals with transmutations and everything that's happening to Earth is making sure that the changes that we're initially seeing, you can't run around in the EDZ and expect to see with your naked eye. That's been like the scale of changes that we've seen so far. It's been like very minor, like micro things that have been shifting around just enough so that this feeling of dread starts to increase. With our future releases, we're going to push that, and we're going to be able to see the effect in a way that's really obvious that we haven't been able to see before. So I think we can expect to see this continue to build on itself within the limitations that we have, and we'll be able to kick in the door in future expressions, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. I'm very much looking forward to the well, I assuming we are going back to Adams and Warbash, I know that there's a Great Lake nearby that has apparently been changed more than the Copper Andes and the Argonne swamps of Georgia, or mangroves of Georgia, rather.
It's very sad, yeah.
Oh boy, okay. Well, I know I can't ask more about that, so moving swiftly on. All right, so going all the way back to the reveal of the Fate Saga and Edge of Fate generally, when you and Robbie Stevens were sitting down for the initial reveal of that, you both talked about how you were aiming to throw jet fuel into the speculation engine of the game's story. With rumors like Bale searching for our tomb, the King of Old Chicago, the Dredgen from the Tharsis Cantina, and even just the mechanics of Eclipse Energy, I think it seems really clear that the community is really attached to that approach. Are there plans to keep going with this approach, or even to double down if it's really making waves?
Yeah, this is stocking the fridge in action. So we're early in the Fate Saga, and that means it's time to stock the fridge with lots of cool ingredients. Just fill it up so that we can start making cool sandwiches later in this metaphor. One of our goals for Edge of Fate and for Renegades was just to pack our stockpile with lots and lots of cool, fun ideas that are new and exciting, alongside a lot of the existing older ideas that we have in Destiny 2. I think we can expect to continue this. We want to keep introducing new things into our world. We want to keep remixing the new with the old. We feel this was really successful, especially in Renegades, being able to take existing characters like Honor and existing ideas like the Dredgen and smash it together with something new and surprising. So yeah, I'd say I'm really happy that this style of storytelling is landing. We have a blast doing it. It's clear that folks have a blast playing through it, and I've seen so many people excited to have new like discussions and ideas and just like banter about Destiny's lore in a way that we haven't for a long time. So I'm excited to see people excited.
Indeed. It's also a nice contrast because years ago, sort of in the period between Lightfall and the Final Shape, there was this sense that after 9 years of a 10-year saga, Destiny felt like a very narratively solved world, you know?
Yes.
A lot of things had been explained. There were a lot of mysteries that had ultimately been revealed, as is the nature of coming to the conclusion of a story. And yeah, it's just really important, I think, to see some of that stockpile of mysteries, the ingredients within the fridge getting refreshed. That being said, a lot of these things are rumors, and I just want to go ahead and ask this question, which maybe throws a spanner in the work of some people, which I'm kind of glad for because, hi, welcome to what I've slowly had to learn over 10 years. How much should we trust all these rumors to be true, right? Because just to give an example of something that has been persistent in Destiny for about 10 years, the very nature of the Nine themselves was a subject that for the first 5 years of Destiny was filled with red herrings. I mean, even down to the point where in Forsaken's lore, in the Mara Senna, there are 9 Awoken that go missing. And it's one of those things of everyone sat there and were like, we've done it, we found the 9, we know what's going on. And then a few months later, in the season of the Drifter, it's revealed that, no, the 9 are a lot more to do with the celestial bodies of the system and the way that dark matter entities interact with us, and they are beings from beyond there. And I also want to point out that a lot of these rumors are being chased by none other than Dredgen Bale, who seems kind of like the individual that would potentially eat up a lie if it fed his world perspective. So I guess, again, that's my question. How much should we trust all of these rumors that are being thrown out there?
Yeah. You know, I won't say whether or not you should trust them, but I will say that my personal approach to storytelling is I'm not a big fan of telling our players that they're foolish for believing something, or that haha, joke's on you, you were wrong. It was actually this thing this whole time. I would much rather introduce a lot of potential threads to follow. And if we decide to go down one of those threads, we're going to find something really cool. If we're not able to go down one of those threads, trust that it exists and that there's potential there that maybe we'll pick up on someday. I'm a pragmatic person. I believe that we should use everything that we have at our disposal. Red herrings are a very tricky tool as a writer. I don't know. I like trusting our players to be smart and figure things out on their own.
I love that answer too. I also want to see at some point, speaking of Bale, Bale is, good lord, we could go on for hours about Bale, and honestly, it's something
I told you he's the best. He is such a mess, and I adore him. I'm so happy that folks are losing their mind over this guy. He's a blast.
Bless this mess was one of the first things that you said to me at the event when I was like, oh my god, Bale. Oh, my goodness. Having actually sat down and read through Sintering in full as well by this point in time. Yeah, wow, there is some stuff to unpack there. I do want to go ahead and jump into Bale a little bit here, but I also want to go ahead and throw out there that, yeah, if we want to do for Bale what we did for Lodi, I'm absolutely down at some point as well, because...
Oh my god, absolutely. You ever get so hard into ultramarathoning that you become a genocidal maniac? Like, damn. His past is crazy. I love it. He's so much fun.
He is so right and so wrong.
So
all at
right
the same
and
time.
so wrong. Yep.
So yeah, absolutely. Would love to go ahead and see if we can organize the Dredgen Bale Power Hour. But I wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about him in this moment. I wanted to ask about the decision to make him just a dude, just a normal human being. Granted, a very privileged human being within the, context of the Lost City, but still just a dude, not a guardian. In my opinion, I think it's probably the most interesting reveal about his character. More interesting than him being a Dredgen. Yeah. About as interesting as him being the mouthpiece for Six within that first mission. And I really enjoy it because of how it's hinted at throughout the story. You know, you get missions where Arnor mentions something along the lines of, I hope Six hasn't allowed you to kill your ghost yet. Or moments in that first cutscene when they're dueling and she says, you follow in the footsteps of Guardian killers. Why do you hate your own kind so much? And he dodges those questions hard. My question is really, how did the team arrive at this particular character decision? Did it appear as a result of other important perspectives that he held? Or was it a part of his story from the very beginning? Was it kind of just like one of the core moments of the genesis for this character? Because I imagine that, I imagine it's the latter, not the former, but I'd just love to know how this character got built out with that in mind, because it really is like the most important defining thing that it feels like everything else stems from.
Because it does. It was one of the earliest choices that we made about that character. I want to give huge credit to the narrative lead, John Toe. John's been with Destiny for over 10 years. He was there to work on the original Dredgens, and when he was leading this release, he pulled a lot of that old knowledge to build on top of. And when he pitched the character of Dredgen Bale, it was always immortal. This was always going to be just a guy who had the guts to go up against Guardians and go up against like all of these infinitely more on paper powerful forces. I love that the center of this character is inherently human. For me, sci-fi can sometimes get away from itself when it forgets that it's inherently about what it means to be human and what it means to be mortal and what it means to be something that's flimsy and fleshy and can die. I find it infinitely more fascinating when we bring ourselves back to those very fragile realities of what it means to be alive. Bale is like this huge like FU to the rest of the Vanguard and the rest of Guardians and to the rest of like us and Destiny, like because the question that this character inherently asks is like, what do you need to be powerful? And all this guy needed was to believe and to hate so hard that it drove every choice he ever made. I find that innately fascinating.
As he says in the lore book, kiss my ass, I guess.
Kiss my ass. Exactly.
And then, just pushing on from all of that further, this is not at all in the questions either, but my God, the ballsy decision for everyone on the staff, regardless of who touched the lore book and who made any kind of motions towards what the lore should be, with regards to his mother being a Guardian. I am floored by just a choice like that, if only because of the fact that it cuts not just to the heart of like, oh, this is the central tragedy of this character. He has no, he has an absent father figure at best, and that's being generous considering some of the ways that he's described. And a mother figure who is now a corrupted and tainted image in his mind because of the way that she treated him when she was a Risen and no longer remembered him. I'm floored because you don't generally see something like that where Destiny's heroes, us Guardians, are forced to accept that we have been an enormous source of pain for some people on a deeply personal level. I've got to ask about that choice.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite calls that we made, and it comes from wanting to poke a stick in the eye of one of the truths of Destiny, which is like Guardians are unnatural. We are zombies. We should not, in the laws of nature, exist. I can't imagine anything more painful for someone who lost a parent and has gone through the grieving process and has cremated them and has tried to move on than to see them just walking around having no idea who you are. That is the most painful thing I can imagine. Being able to like create this character again who is so human and who again is built around such a human fear and a human terror was a total privilege. It was so much fun.
Yet another one of those moments of he is so wrong, but God, is he so right as well.
He's so right. That would turn me into a maniac. Yeah, absolutely.
I would be very proud of myself if I just started doing ultra marathons as a result of that. That seems like
exactly.
At very least at first, it seems like a great adjustment to what is undoubtedly an incredibly traumatic moment. Oh wow.
Yeah, I've seen so many people just kind of like blanket like, oh, like this is just a Kylo Ren clone, or like, oh, this is just a Star Wars thing, and it kind of missing the meat, you know. Like what makes this character fun is like we threw in some Kendall Roy, like we threw in some like very complex emotional realities underneath the surface, and that's the fun part of the character.
Yeah, not to mention that I think the Kylo Ren comparison, especially when you do learn that Bale is human, it completely misses the mark, you know? Ben Solo,
Absolutely,
Kylo
yeah.
Ren, he's part of this lineage of power, so to speak, with,
Yeah.
you know, you know, being a Skywalker. And it's
Yep.
very much one of those moments where you can see that there is a little bit of that sort of predestined greatness, whether that's evil or good within him.
Totally.
Bale is just a dude, and he
Yeah.
without any question or qualm, threw hands with Arno Mahal, who is, you know, one of the Guardians, practically a Guardian executioner, and he was like, "Yeah, I'd win." It's just like,
Yeah, let's go.
No questions.
Let's give it a shot. What do I have to lose? Like that attitude is so fascinating. And you know, like one big difference too between like the Kylos and the Bales is that Bale completely rejects his lineage. Like he's not proud to be a Skywalker the way that Ben Solo is. Like he despises everything about his lineage. He wants to create something new. He wants to create something that is of the people, not a class ruling above it. That's what he despises more than anything.
And in that sense, him accepting, God, we're going to get straight into
I know.
proper Dredge Bale Power Hour, so I'll end it here.
Let's do. I know we should save it.
Him accepting the entire process of unmaking and taking up a new name, it makes so much sense from that perspective.
Poor Nazaire. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so it is Nazaire. Okay.
Yeah.
this-
Nazaire Bizet.
This is another one of the questions, and I'm so glad because I had the inkling that it might as well be Nazaire, considering the way that was described as the first ghosts that had been killed, but not the last. Oh my goodness. Okay. Also, there is something I've got to ask because Lodi is a vessel.
Yes.
Lodi is a vessel, and Bale is a vessel with an asterisk. Being a vessel for the Nine feels as though it is one of these things that some people are better at than others, quite obviously, because whilst there are distinct changes for every vessel, some of them feel a lot more pain than others. Let's just sort of talk about the differences between Bale and Lodi in this regard, and perhaps throw in a hypothetical third person who is literally just an ordinary, normal person.
Yeah, both that normal person and Bale are in the same category. The emissary is special. The emissary was made to be a vessel. They were made and altered in order to accommodate a fourth dimensional being jumping on in there and riding shotgun. The average person is not meant to do that. And one of the important, if not the most important lesson of Renegades is that what is happening to Bale is unnatural. That average mortals, average immortals, average people are not meant to host something as big as this inside of themselves. One of the big things that we wanted to convey is how if you are not the emissary, hosting one of the Nine inside of you, it burns you from the inside out.
And I have to say as well, there is a vivid bit of imagery that was given off in some of the lore for Renegades. Shout out to, I believe we discussed at one point, the writer who came up with
Yes.
the Dredge and Bale. I'm going to call it the Darth Malak moment for those of us who played KOTOR and who went all the way through the campaign to see that horrific reveal of what's underneath his sort of metal faceplate. He absolutely has a moment like that where he just pulls off his nose. And shout out to whomsoever made that call and wrote that, because that's horrifying and I love it. I hate it, but I love it.
It's delightful and disgusting. And I again, like proof of Bale's devotion. Like he knows now what is happening to him is unnatural. That one scene where he is being unknowingly interrogated by Lodi and has the realization for the first time of, what do you mean you're fine? That would cause me to break down too, given everything that he's gone through.
He is eternally just I think that's probably Bale's biggest flaw that I love, and oh god, I really wish he would learn from, is just he cannot get over something that confirms his worldview.
Nope. Never.
It's impossible for him to escape. Okay, moving on, because otherwise I am just going to get stuck on that. All right. Different question. Let's talk about another facet of awesome lore. Let's talk about Six and the Lord of Every Nothing. It's part of the deeper reaches of the lore, and I am sure that it is also going to be big in the future of the story, because it involves Six, and it also involves a god of the Taken that they manifested by themselves. Terrifying on both ends of things. Six is benefiting from sword logic and doesn't necessarily even understand the concept of death. These are fascinating things that we're playing with. Can you tell us more about the dynamic between Six and the Lord of Every Nothing? I understand that this is one of those questions where you might not be able to answer much, but I'd love to know what you can tell us.
I can tell quite a bit, actually. I would imagine these two as neighbors in the same apartment building. Saturn 6 is a planet and a 9, kind of one and the same, existing inside of our world. And Saturn has been the location for a couple of different, very interesting happenings over the last few years. I imagine that 6 would be looking out into its rings and seeing, like, hey, I think the Taken made themselves a god. Like, they just kind of willed their own deity into being out of nothing. That's incredible. I gotta meet this guy. Who is this dude? He seems pretty interesting. They are separate beings, but they occupy kind of the same space. The Lord of Every Nothing obviously is a Taken god of the ascendant plane, and these two entities, I imagine, would be greatly fascinated by one another. They both kind of have what the other one want. And yeah, I think that Six has always been a curious and observant being, not only learning from, like, hey, this is a god that made themselves, that kind of appeared out of nowhere. I'm interested in learning who they are, but also interested in Oryx, the Taken King, who died and ended up here. Learning from Oryx and from the hive that followed him, what it means to be a follower of sword logic has greatly influenced Six and given Six the escape route that they desperately need. Maybe if he has enough power, he can get what he wants. Death is a tool.
Yeah, and it's also, I've got to point out as well the curiosity aspect of it as well, because that is a very Oryx trait to it all. So it all flows quite naturally. Everything feels like it's Six just reaching into this, unknown part of the universe and some of its laws within the Ascendant Plane and saying, so this kind of works in this manner, I think. I'm not sure what the components are of this, brackets death, given that it's a fourth dimensional being and it doesn't have the same relation with time and existence that we do. And it's just sort of like playing around with everything. It's fascinating to know that too, because I think also, at the very least in my mind, there was a hierarchy, right? Where the Lord of Every Nothing was kind of above Six, but hearing you describe them as being within the neighbors within the same apartment building, I think is actually really important context for anything else, because it dissuades from that idea, and if nothing else, maybe it shines a light on the idea of, like, hey, this is not really the kind of thing that you think it is necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. And we've been very careful and coy with how we present the Lord of Every Nothing, because we want this being to be something intriguing. We don't necessarily want to divulge everything about what they are and what they're about and what he wants. But we also don't want for the Lord of Every Nothing to overshadow the true villain that we're dealing with, which is Six, which, to jump to one of your later questions, is the Alchemist. Like, this is a force that we'll need to deal with for quite some time.
You know what? Let's just go ahead and jump to that question right away.
Let's go.
Because, I was one amongst several who sat there and saw the term alchemist being referred to within the law book for imminent, and thought, aha, it's Maya Sundaresh. But no,
I know it broke my heart. I was watching from my screen like, no, Bive, no.
Oh no, he did the wrong thing. Oh god. Oh, he interpreted the words not
it's
literally.
Our special hell. It's okay.
It's yeah.
You're fine. You're fine. And also, it's understandable at the same time. Like, one of the troubles with writing as a medium is there are only so many words, and some of them are best used as universal metaphors. But yeah, when we've used the term alchemist with a capital A, it has always been for exactly one guy.
Okay. So this, I mean, basically a confirmation that within a couple of expansions' time, Six is going to be another reoccurring villain and another figure within all of this and within the Fate Saga.
Yeah, the first year has been a slow build-up in the background, and we'll get to see a lot more of him.
Very exciting. Okay. Next up, Arnor Mahal. First of all, love her. Absolutely fantastic presentation. I'm so glad that we have someone who, this is a total aside to the question, but an actual vision of wisdom in the sense that when presented with truth and realizing that she is wrong, she immediately understands that, yeah, you know, pragmatically I need to change my approach because clearly it's wrong.
Yes.
That is an understated part of wisdom, and I really appreciate that. However, she's reforming the Praxic Order now, and even if she loses her Cormorant seal in the process, it seems like she has had a really big lasting impact on the universe just based on these actions alone. Given that her story is really interwoven with that of Bale, how soon can we expect to see Arnor again? And for that matter, I guess how soon can we expect to see Bale again if the two are still interwoven?
Yeah, Arnor is busy. She's learned a lot. She's been able to make a big impact on the Praxic Order, and she's got work to do. I think we aren't going to see her in a major way for a little bit. Give her some time to cook. Bale, on the other hand, is a busy boy. We're going to be seeing him much more frequently and in the near future.
Okay, gotcha. On to another really cool part of Renegades, Rao and the Totality Division. I could say Syndicates generally because I love all of them, but the Rao and the Totality Division, she's hit really hard with fans for no other reason perhaps than the copious amounts of drop pods and behemoths that she's allowed us to use throughout the Frontier.
Oh yeah.
However, her story is also a really interesting evolution of how the Scions are continuing to work outside of the agenda of the Barant-led Cabal faction that is at the heart of this story, the Barant Imperium. That's something that happens generally. The Scions are often assisting the Barant-led factions, be it the Shadow Legion of Callus back in the day, or Keitel's Ascendancy, or just even Red Legion remnants that are out there kind of just still persisting all over the place.
Yeah.
This is not the first time this has happened. Is all of the Scion scheming leading somewhere? Because we have a ton of disparate groups of them throughout a ton of these different disparate factions, and yeah, it feels like, especially with a character like Rao being close to the forefront of things, it feels as though there is something building in the background. Is there any merit to that?
Yeah, we put all of this here intentionally. It's an ingredient in the fridge. This is all a thread that we're excited by, which is why it's here. I find Rao to be exciting and fascinating. I'm so happy to see her as popular as she is. And yeah, I don't think I can answer much more other than, like, we're excited by this and we're glad to see folks are too.
I will say as well, it took me by surprise. I was very convinced that Zephyrus and Tharsis Reformation were going to be the most interesting of the syndicates purely based on who they are, but you know, the more I got to know the Pikers and the Totality Division, the more I started to realize that there is a genuine facet to appreciate about every single one of these syndicates.
There's a lot of love that went into each of these syndicates. We assigned different writers to work on each of them, and they brought so much personality and so much depth into each expression of the different syndicates. It's been really fun to watch how people have been appreciating them so far. But yeah, we put a lot of love into making sure that these felt rich and fun, and we're just excited that people are fans of our characters the way that we are.
I think it was the Fast Talker, the SMG, and the Lore tab there that told me everything I needed to know about Rao as well, which is just, this is a character that I can attach to, because it's not just someone who's using the power of the Barant Imperium as just a load of leverage and essentially using it as this central core of corruption. Like, she has goals, she has ambitions.
She does.
But they're very much from a virtuous place, and I think that's one of those things that really made me gravitate towards her a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah, she's got a cause, and one that she believes in. I'm really excited to have this as an element that we might get to play with in the future.
Moving on to talking about different aliens, We've seen the Elixni, Vex, and now the Cabal at the forefront of these stories of the Fate Saga across both Edge of Fate and Renegades. That leaves the Dread, Taken, Scorn, and of course the Hive, having not left their mark in the saga's stories just yet. Who are you most excited for within the future stories of the Fate Saga amongst those four groups?
Man, Hive, I am so excited for, mostly because where we left them at the end of Heresy leaves a lot of really fun dynamics to play with. The Hive are in a really curious place, and I'm excited to be able to pick them up and shake them around a little bit and see what they're doing now that we took the Pantheon and kind of did what we did and had some fun with it. The Dread are my biggest favorite, most exciting question mark, because who's in charge? Now that the witness isn't here, what do they want? And what they want is, I imagine, to not be what they are anymore. The Dread did not make themselves, they were made. And figuring out what happens to them and what they want for themselves is going to be a really interesting question.
And the interesting thing is, even back in Heresy for them, and sorry, I've got to focus on the Dread. I love the Hive. Yeah. Everyone well and truly knows that I adore the Hive, but the Dread are fascinating to me. And I love that even by the time of Heresy, you kind of had this schism where it was Kater and her great faction of the Dread who went and assembled on Saturn and followed the call of the Lord of Every Nothing and was searching for the Echo and everything. Meanwhile, you had all of the Dread that combined with some of the random Hive that assaulted Sundered Doctrine and tried to go into Rolk's Pyramid. And it represents those two different groups from the very beginning, but yeah, totally different sets of desires. One group really needed a leader and a voice that could give them direction. And the other group was like, nah, dude, we're making this for ourselves. We're going to find our own place in the universe. It's not going to be given to us.
Yeah, their story of self-determination I find really exciting.
Okay, and one of the final questions that I have today. In the future, will we see more old Destiny mysteries or more new ones? This kind of links into a lot of the stuff we've said today, but I think that some of the oldest mysteries in Destiny, there's a few of them that still kick about, and I really enjoy when those get brought up, but I also know that we're seeding a lot of new mysteries in this particular time in the Fate Saga. What are we going to see more of, though?
The answer is both. I just got to work on a lore tab that tackles a real old one just yesterday. I think both. We don't move as an IP unless we stick true to what's been established already. And we don't move if we don't build on top of it too at the same time. So I think like the art is in understanding which mysteries matter, which ones should we keep as mysteries, and which ones do deserve an answer. And for the new stuff, like what helps our world feel larger and richer and more full, we can do both.
Chicago, old Chicago in particular, home to a lot of intriguing things. What more can be said about the thing that Lodi is looking out of the eyes of, if anything? I imagine the answer is nothing at all. But I imagine that, you know, there is maybe a nugget of information somewhere that can be shared about that. Is there anything you can tell us about who Lodi is looking through the eyes of?
It's one of those old mysteries that you were just talking about. When I first started working at Destiny and I was learning the IP for the first time, I remember messaging a new friend here at Bungie and saying, "What do you mean there's a monster under Chicago and we've never talked about it?" So yeah. That's about all I can say.
Well. Okay, I will go ahead and leave it there. Allison, thank you so much again for taking the time to sit down and talk about Renegades and, of course, about Destiny generally. It is always so much fun.
Bife, it is always a delight. I love chatting with you. I am so excited for both of us to vibrate and rise out of our chairs when we do Baal Power Hour. This will be so much fun.
And, you know, I've said it 10 billion times, and I know the joke is probably old between us, but I'm going to invoke the kind of like Stranger Things, and instead of Hellfire Club, I am going to call that the Balefire Club.
Yeah.
In that particular moment. So yeah,
excellent.
Absolutely.
I'm there.
We'll see about
I'll
getting
bring
that done too. Hell yeah, we'll make t-shirts. Excellent.
Done.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you so much again for taking the time, and have a wonderful day. I look forward to seeing what's coming around in the next second year of the Fate Saga, and to seeing where the story takes us next.